Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Today, it is brought to you by EMT Solar and Roofing. See if your home qualifies for a free roof with solar installation. No commitments, no hidden fees. Go to espnsolar.com to see if you qualify. You know, Geoff Mosher's here on a Friday edition of Football at 4. And when I put those Football at 4 openers together with the Jeff Lurie bites, I remember doing it at a time when the team was really bad. You know, they only won like 4 games a couple of years ago. And he said these things, you know, about we're competing for championships. And I thought to myself, man, you know, this team is pretty far off. Well, here they have a chance on Sunday to be the number 1 seed in the NFC and cap off really a special season. You know, they could win 14 games this season. I mean, the change in where they were when those bites were made, when those quotes from Jeffrey Lurie were made to where they are right now is truly amazing.
It really is. I mean, I think a lot of people felt this team was going to be a much improved team going into this season. I did too. I just didn't think, you know, I certainly didn't think they were going to win 13 of their first 14 games and sort of rise to the level of dominance that you've seen in 2 separate stretches now, like the opening, winning your first 8 games. And then, you know, after that Indianapolis game that they won 17-16, they went on a nice little streak there of 4 straight games of averaging around 38 points per game. So they've flexed their muscle. And as you mentioned, they have a chance to clinch the number 1 seed and the division. Of course, though, that this would be their 3rd time. And that's the surprising thing, that this is their 3rd opportunity in 3 weeks. You kind of thought it would have been taken care of by now.
You really did. To help take care of that, Jalen Hurts. The injury report has just come out, hot off the press, and Jalen Hurts is officially listed as limited today, questionable for the game. Is this gamesmanship or is there some concern?
I think there's always, you know, we talked about this, Adam and I, on the Inside the Birds pod. It's like when a guy doesn't play in a game Sunday, and then on Monday or Tuesday, the coaches are like day by day. People are like, well, wait, is he playing or is he not? Is this gamesmanship or is not? And I think sometimes people forget with injuries that it is, when you're day to day, it's because you have to go out there, you have to do certain things, and then you have to see how the injury responds to certain things. So I kept hearing on Wednesday and Thursday when Nick Sirianni would say, you know, he's limited, or the report would say that, or that they're not sure. It's like, why doesn't he just name him the starter? Why doesn't he either just rule him out or rule him in? Why does it? Because you don't know. It's all a process, right? There's medical people involved. There's the player involved and the coach involved. Sometimes it is obvious, but in this case. I
get that. Like somebody asked a question today. I don't Dave Zungaro, I guess. I don't know who it was because it looks – I'm going through the transcript here. Somebody asked a question, Chris Franklin, and then Dave followed up, and then Bo Wolf. So I thought it was the same guy, and I guess he was asked, like, is he cleared for contact? Oh, Bo Wolf. Has he been cleared for contact? And Sirianni was like, oh, how do I answer that one? You know, like he didn't know what to say.
That one did seem like he knew the answer and did not want to give it.
Correct. Like that one to me was like, has he been cleared for contact? We say he's cleared to play or he's not cleared to play. We don't say contact. Well, come on. Like he was like looking over like they got me on this one.
Yeah, because it's sort of an in-between. If you're out there at practice, you have been medically cleared to practice, but that doesn't mean you've been medically cleared to play in a game. But then that also goes back to, well, how does he respond to practice?
Well, for instance, Mosher, last week, Andrew was on yesterday, and he said last week he could not do the contact drills when they try to strip the ball from you. This week he could. So last week there was something different that he couldn't do that he could do this week.
Yes, and they knew last week pretty early the way the shoulder was feeling, the injury that he had, that the trajectory was that he was not going to be able to play. They knew that, of course. But again, this is a week where he did more. He was able to go out to the walkthrough, which he didn't do the 2 prior weeks. He was able to do he was able to practice. They're calling it limited. We know he's been taking reps. He obviously, you saw, got his shoulder all whacked up there lightly whacked up in the contact drill. So the point is, he's trending toward playing. I guess he's listed as questionable, but it sounds like he's going to be good to go. And To me, I think he's going to play unless he wakes up tomorrow and it's like, man, after 2 days of throwing the ball, my shoulder is stiff and sore. Then that obviously changes the equation. So if he does play, though, the question is, how can this coaching staff and this player, who is an aggressive player, how can they together orchestrate an offense that is going to alleviate hits on that shoulder? Because it's not going to be 100%, obviously. And so you're not going to see him. I don't think you're seeing. I think even Nick Sirianni said this today that they're going to have to design an offense that's not going to be very, zone read heavy, at least with the quarterback design run element of it. But anybody can get sacked at any time, so they're going to have to really work hard to kind of reinvent their quick game offense that they had earlier in the year. And I think Jalen Hurts has to show that discipline of, if the pocket's collapsing, if it's not there and he's flushed out, just throw it out of bounds. Don't try to pick up or slide quickly. Try to alleviate as much hits as possible on that shoulder.
Well, let me ask you this question. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the team is that down on Minshew? Did they look at that and say, man, he was bad? Or, look, he played well enough against Dallas to win that game. I mean, are they at the point where they have lost confidence that they could win this game with Minshew?
I don't think so. Not at all. I mean, no. To me, the answer is no. I get no vibe that. I mean, they know what he is. They believe he's a high-end backup.
Right. So are they rushing Hurts to play in this game because they don't think Minshew gives them a great shot to win it, I guess?
I mean, if the Eagles didn't think that Gardner Minshew could beat the Giants' backups, then that's a whole separate argument altogether. I think that the optics are it's the last week of the season and you need to clinch, so we need you in there. But the reality is, last year, Jalen Hurts hurt his ankle. He took a week. You remember he missed the game Minshew started, and then he was back for the next game, even though he wasn't 100%. Players play at less than 100% all the time. It's just that this one and I get it. People say, well, you have an opportunity to rest him, though, if you just let Gardner Minshew win the game. You can't take anything for granted in the NFL. You know that. Who was it? Was it the Colts last year that lost to the Jaguars in the season finale with all the So, and the Jaguars stunk. So the point here is that if
apparently the Colts did too, by the way, though.
And the Colts did too, right? But if Jalen Hurts is capable of playing and you need to win the game, then you play him because you need to win the game.
Yeah, I'm just, looking at it like this Giants team's playing a lot of backups, and I feel like there's a lot of panic for a team that you just beat 48-22 a couple of weeks ago. And it's like, I guess the question more is, are they rushing Hurts back because they don't trust the other guy, or do they just think he's ready to play? And because the game has meaning, let's just play him because he gives us our best chance.
Yeah, I would say B. And trust me, if Jalen Hurts wakes up Sunday and the shoulder is achy and it's not as it takes a setback, I don't think they're going to say, well, suck it up. You can throw the ball. That's good. They would go to Minshew in a heartbeat if they needed to. And by the way, I think if they go up by 17 points or more in the second half, I wouldn't be surprised if they said, thanks, Jalen, sit down. We'll take it from here with Gardner.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. Let's go. We know out for the game. Let's pull up the official injury report. Out is Sean Bradley, Lane Johnson, Avant Maddox, Janarius Robinson, and Josh Sweat. I don't know if there was any hope that Sweat would be ready, but do we think Sweat is in danger of missing playoff time? What do we know about that injury? Because obviously it was a scary one as well.
Yeah, it's not something we've heard about that. Sounds like he's fine, and I think that if it was like, maybe, oh wow, the Eagles waived Sua Opeta. I did not see that, so I guess that means that they
need a spot for the punter.
Yeah, you got to sign the punter. So there you go. And then obviously we're gonna have to see what happens with both C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Robert Quinn, because if those two guys are going to be active, then two other guys either have to get waived or go on IR.
Right, I was going to say, like, they've got some roster decisions because the punter, you can only use 3 designations. They've done those 3, so you either have to waive him and bring a new punter on board, or now make him, he has no more practice squad designations.
It's amazing. They waived Sua Opeta, but they're keeping the offensive lineman who has not played, who was made the team as a rookie free agent. I can't think of his name right now. It's what's his name? He's got the same last name as somebody else on the team. I'll go through it and check it. But they kept him. Remember, they let Jack Anderson go, and they waived Coyote Awosika, who was then brought back to the practice squad, then signed by somebody else just to keep this. Sills, Josh Sills, right? It's amazing he's still on the team. I guess he's a bigger guy and a little younger, so they could see him as a more versatile prospect. But so the point is, I think Josh Sweat will be fine, and he's just a guy who they're not going to risk putting out there, fresh off that scary injury last week, because they got plenty of pass rushers.
Now, did you get a sense today when he was asked about C.J. Gardner-Johnson? He said he's doing a good job. We'll see practice, see how everything goes. We're hopeful. Does hopeful sound like they wanted to play Sunday, or are they just hopeful that he's back for the playoffs?
No, I interpret it as that they're hopeful to play him on Sunday, and then we'll see if he's put on the 53-man, then he's playing. We'll know this by 4 o'clock tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. Saturday. Yes.
Saturday 4 o'clock. Yes. If he's on the active roster, then he would be good to go. How do you?
The guy I would say, like, do you really need Robert Quinn for this game? I mean, he had not done much since you got him. He had a back injury, has had a knee injury. I feel like that's the guy you just want for 8 to 10 snaps in the playoffs, if not more, if he can handle it. I don't know what kind of benefit it is to get Robert Quinn out there for a few snaps against the Giants' backups. I think it's more beneficial for C.J. Gardner-Johnson because he hasn't played in a while. He's not a rotational player. He's an everyday player. You want to get your conditioning back. I imagine if he does play, it's not going to be the entire game, but just in situations where he can get his conditioning back.
Yeah, I would say the only reason you might want to see Quinn is, hey, can this guy help us out in the playoffs? Let me give you 10 to 12 snaps and see if this knee it has improved to the point where you can now help us.
Yeah, maybe. But at his age and with what he's accomplished, I'd almost say let's just keep him fresh and give him as much time as he needs and then unleash him,
C.J. Gardner-Johnson, though.
He gives you a Ryan Kerrigan-like effort who came out of nowhere last year to give you 2 sacks against the Bucs.
That's right. That's right. He was the only guy who showed up. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, though, what is your anticipation with Maddox out on how they use him when he returns? Is he going to go right back to his other role? Or is he going to be in this, Maddox was kind of in this hybrid role when we last saw him?
Yeah, what we anticipate is that he will play safety where he's played before. Now, I always think in the playoffs, if things can change on a dime, just like I would expect Jack Driscoll to start right tackle, and in the playoffs, if Lane Johnson starts but can't make it through and has to come out, I would expect that Jack Driscoll would be in there at right tackle, not Jordan Mailata moving to right tackle and Andre Dillard at left tackle. But I will say, if you're playing a wild card game, a division game, and your right tackle who's filling in is a turnstile, then you got to go and do what you got to do, right? And if you're playing in a playoff game and 8 straight passes get completed on your slot corner while CJ is playing safety, maybe you switch up something for the sake of just trying to survive in advance. But in general, I would think this coaching staff, from what we understand, would want to play C.J. Gardner-Johnson where he flourished, and that was at safety. That's where he's practiced. That's where he knows his defense, and that's where I would expect him to continue to be.
Yeah, I know that, because I think anyway, maybe you saw it differently. I think Avant was playing some slot and some safety. When they went to a more base defense, they just shifted him from the nickel spot to the safety spot. Theoretically, you could do a similar thing with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You could play him in both spots.
You could move some things around, and of course, the idea is not to panic, right? Like, that if your slot corner is Josiah Scott and you're playing the Cowboys in the divisional round, and Dak Prescott completes a couple of passes to CeeDee Lamb on Josiah Scott, you don't just sit there and tear up your game plan. I mean, the game plan is always to give up stuff. If you have to give up stuff, it's going to be underneath and not get beat over the top. And that's why CJ's been so good for this defense, because he's made so many plays on teams trying to beat them over the top, to the point where they've not minded giving up the intermediary stuff because they were able to turn possession over anyway with the playmaking that CJ was giving them.
Hey, I want to get your take, if you will, on Kaiser White. I had watched some of the games the last couple of weeks, and I'm a Kaiser White fan. He's a West Virginia guy, but I was like, man, teams seem to be targeting him the last couple of games here. I don't know if that's just something that I'm kind of noticing, or is that something that
you're
people
not imagining it?
All right, because I like Kaiser, and I'm like, man, it seems that the middle is. And I don't know if that's a product of Maddox not being on one there and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson not being there. So now he's kind of being stuck with two weaker guys around him. Or are people saying, hey, where's 43?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. His coverage has not been great, but I also think that, to your point, when the Eagles were at full strength on defense, when C.J. Gardner-Johnson was at safety, when Avant Maddox was your slot corner, and you had Bradbury and Slay, they were playing such a great style of team defense, and their defense in general, their zone especially, and their matchup zone on third down, which involves some man elements and some zone, was so harmonious, and everybody was playing their role and doing what they were supposed to do, that I just think it just catered to everyone's strengths. And obviously then when you lose one, then you lose another, and you have to shift into a little bit of guys not playing the positions and being out of position a little bit, that has a team-wide impact. And it might also bring out some of the weaknesses. Now, Kaiser White can run fast, but not everybody that can run fast can cover really well. So I think you do see teams trying to spread him out a little bit more and throw underneath on him, and they have taken advantage of that. And he has not looked as good as he did for the first 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season.
And I don't know if the Giants can exploit that because they don't have a lot of weapons. But playoff time, we'll see what ends up happening if Maddox isn't there. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, people forget, he still leads the league in interceptions. He hasn't played in 5 weeks.
Right, and it is worth noting, Mike, to your point, like Tyrod Taylor, he's not – last year they played Jake Fromm, and that was some of the worst quarterbacking I've ever seen in my life. And then they took Jake Fromm out and put in Mike Glennon and continued to see some of the worst quarterbacking you've ever seen in your life. And that game was still close. It was 6-6 at halftime, if you remember. Tyrod Taylor is a good backup in this league. I mean, he's a guy who's got a lot of experience. I think he's made a Pro Bowl. He's played in a ton of games, and he's a big check down. He's not a drive the ball down the field guy. So to your point on can Tyrod Taylor or Giants backups be able to take advantage of some of the things that teams have been doing to the Eagles defense over the last few weeks? Well, yeah, Tyrod Taylor can. And they've got some decent backup tight ends, and they've got some running backs they can throw to with Breida, and Brightwell had a decent game out. So I would imagine that they will try to test that. They're still going to game plan, right? Even though they're playing backups, Don Martindale's going to blitz. He's going to use backups, but he's going to blitz because that's what he does. And Mike Kafka and Dable have all year survived on throwing to tight ends, throwing to running backs, getting your nickel and dime yards because they just don't have guys that can stretch the field. So they are going to look to do the same things.
Geoff Mosher, I'll leave you with this. What's more important, getting the number 1 seed or making sure that Hurts is healthy?
Making sure that Hurts is healthy. Obviously, I believe the Eagles have shown that if they had to win 3 road games, against the teams that they probably have to play, they could do it. It's obviously a lot tougher. So I'm not saying that this is an ideal scenario either, but obviously, if Gardner Minshew have to be the quarterback for the rest of the way, I don't think that they're a Super Bowl team. And I like Gardner, but unless you catch fire like Nick Foles,
right?
Which, how often does that happen?
Right.
But,
it's like you play 2 home games with Gardner Minshew or 3 road games with Jalen Hurts. Which gives you the better shot?
Yeah, I still like the 3 road games with Jalen Hurts.
All right, Geoff Mosher is, of course, Inside the Birds pregame show tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Inside the Birds postgame show after the game is over. And the Inside the Birds podcast will drop on Monday morning with more reaction to the Eagles, Giants. And then we won't know the Eagles' opponent, but we will know some hopefully we will not know an Eagles opponent because that would mean they clinched the number 1 seed and got the bye. If we know their opponent, that means they lost and will now face someone on wild card weekend. Geoff Mosher.
Can you imagine winning 13 of your first 14 games and then somehow winding up with the 5th seed? Like, it's almost incomprehensible.
It really is. It really is. Now that you say it like that, no, I can't imagine it. So. All right, man.
All right, see you.
Take it easy. Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast.